January 8, 1989, London Sislo Airport. A British Airways Flight 92 is waiting at the airport to take off. The direct flight route is London to Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is a regular short-haul flight with a total of 118 passengers on board and a crew of 8. The non-stop flight is operated by a Boeing 737-400. This aircraft was built in 1988. It was only 2 months old when it departed. Total flight time is less than 500 hours. The Boeing 737-400 was at the time a new type of airliner, less than a year old. The captain of this flight was Kevin, 43 years old, with 13,176 hours of flight experience, but only 763 hours in a Boeing 737, and he is also one of British Airways' most senior captains. The co-pilot was David, at 39 years old. He has only 3,290 hours of flying experience. He has flown the Boeing 3 for only 192 hours. Only 192 hours. At 1915, the plane was cleared for takeoff by the tower. The plane started to accelerate on the runway. Shortly afterwards, the plane took off without incident. If there is no accident, they will arrive at their destination in 75 minutes. The weather conditions were perfect. It was a good day for flying. At 1928, the aircraft climbed to an altitude of 8,500 meters and continued to a cruising altitude of 10,600 meters. Suddenly, without warning, there was a loud bang on the plane. The aircraft started to shake violently. The pilot in the cockpit also noticed the abnormality. To make matters worse, they smelled a fat stench of smoke. Although the captain had more than 700 hours of experience flying 737s, but he had only 23 hours on the Boeing 737-400 aircraft for only 23 hours. So he wasn't familiar with the airliner. David, the co-pilot, had only 53 hours. The malfunction that had just occurred, both of them felt overwhelmed. They had to report a malfunction to the tower. They asked to lower the altitude of the plane and got permission from the tower. After some checks, the pilot decided that smoke could only enter the cockpit through the air conditioning ducts because the Boeing 737's air conditioning is linked to the engine system. The pilot speculated that the plane's engine was malfunctioning due to the angle of vision at night. The pilot in the cockpit, they could not see the condition of the engine. They could only use the cockpit instruments to determine the condition of the aircraft, but the pilots were not familiar with the Boeing 737-400 airliner was not familiar with the instrumentation system. They scanned the displays. They determined that the right engine was malfunctioning. So the captain shut down the right engine of the plane. The horrible noise and vibration disappeared. Flight 92 seemed to be back to normal, but that scene just now left the crew in a state of shock. So the captain decided to find a nearby airport to make an emergency landing. After contacting the tower, ATC cleared them to land at the nearby East Midlands Airport. At 2017, the aircraft descended to an altitude of 2,000 meters. ATC asked Captain Kevin to turn right and align with the runway. The aircraft was about to enter the final stage of landing. In order to avoid another accident, the crew decided to shut down the right engine and then increased the thrust of the left engine, because even if there is only one engine, normal landing of this aircraft is not a problem. But when the power of the left engine was increased, unexpected things happen again. 20:22 There was a much louder noise on the plane. Passengers found this sound was coming from the other engine of the plane. This time the vibration was more violent than the previous one. ATC immediately contacted Flight 92 to descend to 600 meters in order to land as soon as possible. At this time, the cockpit spirit is loud. The captain saw that Bobby had buckled. The left engine was also on fire and failed. At this moment, the aircraft is like a huge glider. At this moment, the captain rushed to pull up the nose and let the co-pilot try to restart the engine, trying to make the plane to the runway. But the plane was now less than 300 meters high. They didn't have enough time to make it out. The plane's near-ground alarm kept going off. The controls kept shaking. This symptom indicated that the plane had lost speed. The crew judged by the runway lights. They were only 2 kilometers away from the airport. A few seconds later, the plane passed over the village and flew 30 meters over the highway. The tail of the plane hit the side and bounced back into the air. The plane plunged headlong into the trees along the highway. The fuselage broke into 3 sections, only 900 meters away from the run. Fortunately, they avoided the village and the highway. After the accident, rescue operations were quickly launched. British Airways Flight 92 with 126 people on board, a total of 79 people were rescued, 47 people were killed. The cause of the accident. The left engine broke due to a defective blade design damaged the engine. The captain of the plane, Kevin, determined at the time it was the right engine of the aircraft that failed, causing the aircraft to vibrate and emit smoke. Because the right engine of the Boeing 737 series aircraft is responsible for controlling the air conditioning system on board, but starting with the 737-400 airliners, Boeing redesigned the system so that both engines were in charge of the control. Pilots were misled. Some cabin attendants and passengers knew that the left engine was malfunctioning, but no one informed the pilots in the cockpit. They thought the pilots knew that the left engine was the problem, when the right engine, which had no problem, was shut down on the plane. Vibration and the smoke in the cabin coincidentally improved. This led the pilot to believe that the right engine was malfunctioning. And just as the crew was checking, confirmed that the previous actions were correct, the tower officially informed the crew. The landing instructions led to the crew not finding the error in the end. The two pilots, obviously, had not been trained to deal with engine failure causing vibration and smoke problems, which caused them to make a mistake at the same time. But it's rare for two pilots to be wrong at the same time. But it's rare for two pilots to make a mistake at the same time. Coupled with the fact that the instruments on the plane that indicate the status of the engines and the Boeing 737-400's overly complex 37-400's overly complex piloting system, thus making the situation worse.